So most investors think real estate distress hits like a tornado. It's loud, obvious, catastrophic. But guess what? Here's the truth. It starts with silence. Invisible cracks you won't spot unless you know exactly where to look. So picture this example. You're about to bid $32 million on a 185,000 square foot industrial complex. Another investor walks away after only bidding 22 million. And then 6 months later, it sells at foreclosure for 19 million. Why did they see what you missed? That $13 million difference between your bid and reality, well, that's the cost of not reading the silence. So today, I'm teaching you my silent system. 5 distress signals that whisper before markets crash. And in case you're wondering, Cornell Dayne here. I've navigated commercial real estate for over 2 decades, helping clients quietly outmaneuver markets. And what I'm sharing today isn't theory. These are signals I've tracked to consistently stay ahead of market downturns. And by the end of this, you'll never look at listings the same way. And if you watch and catch the pattern I reveal in signal number 4, you're already thinking like a pro. So here's what keeps me up at night for my clients. Imagine finding the perfect industrial complex, 200,000 square feet, solid tenant base, strong logistics location. You do your standard due diligence, everything checks out. You close at $28 million. But 3 months later, the major tenant exercises their break clause. And then 6 months later, you realize you bought someone else's exit strategy. They saw the distress signals and you didn't. That's not just a bad deal. That's your reputation, your capital, and your confidence taking a direct hit worth millions. But those who master the silent system, they become the exit strategy others pay premium prices for. And real talk, if you're still waiting for obvious signs, you're the mark at the poker table. But before we dive into the tactical framework, if you're already deploying serious capital or facing critical portfolio decisions, I've created something specifically for investors like you. It's called 30 Days with Cornell, one strategic insight per day, drawn directly from active deals and current market intelligence. No fluff, just actionable intelligence that reads like a private briefing. Completely free, link in the description below. All right, here's what's coming your way. The silence system. 5 distress signals you've probably missed, how I spot cracks in deals before others even know they're there, and why most investors accidentally become someone else's exit plan. But first, you need to understand something that'll change how you read every listing, because distress doesn't announce itself. It whispers. And the first whisper, it's hiding in plain sight. The S in silence stands for stalled progress. So last year, I drove past the same coming soon banner for 4 months. Beautiful sight, impressive renderings, but something felt off. Imagine a heartbeat monitor stuck on pause. No flat line yet, but no healthy pulse either. That's how stalled developments look to me. Do this with me right now. Think of a project in your area that's been coming soon for months. Got one in mind? Now, here's what separates stalled from delayed. Same delivery dates week after week, suites listed as available, but no rents quoted, no broker contact information because no one's actually marketing it, and marketing materials that never change despite promising dynamic new workspace solutions. That project I mentioned, 6 months later, foreclosure auction, the coming soon signs, they were covering up, funding gone.
Nope.
And if you're already thinking about checking project timelines, you're getting it. But frozen motion is just the beginning, because the next signal reveals why smart money disappears before anyone notices. But first, you need to understand the psychology of professional retreat. The I in silence, industry exodus. Here's something that happens behind closed doors. When experienced brokers see early distress signals, they don't just reduce marketing, they disappear entirely. In their minds, their reputation is worth more than any single commission. I watched this pattern with a Class B office building about 3 years ago. Active marketing for 60 days, aggressive broker push, then 3 price drops in a month, then nothing. Listing vanished. And here's the human psychology most investors miss. Brokers are social creatures. Their entire business model depends on relationships and reputation. When they sense a deal is headed for disaster, they don't fight it. They quietly retreat to protect their standing with future clients. And it's not personal, it's survival. Once you understand the psychology, the pattern becomes obvious. Here's exactly what broker retraction looks like. So, number one, aggressive 90-day marketing push. Number two, price drops once, twice, maybe 3 times, and then silence. Number three, listing disappears. 4, no lease announced, no sale recorded. So here's your homework. Start tracking listings that catch your eye. Screenshot them. Check back in 30 days, and you'll be amazed how many quietly disappear without explanation. That building I mentioned 6 months after the broker retraction foreclosure notice, the broker saw it coming and vanished to protect their track record. What they knew that the owner didn't, once you're dropping prices 3 times in 30 days, you're not repositioning anymore. You're in free fall. But Cornell, maybe they're just repositioning. Well, sure, that happens. But here's what will haunt you. What if they're not? What if you chase a repositioning story while missing the distress signal? If you caught yourself thinking, I need to track listing changes, you're already ahead of 90% of investors. But broker exodus is obvious compared to what tenants do when they see the writing on the wall. Because the next signal happens inside buildings while owners think everything's fine. Which brings us to the L in silence, which is lease cannibalization. This one's subtle until it's catastrophic. So picture a 150,000 square foot mixed use center, solid on paper, and then one tenant subleases 8,000 square feet. Normal, right? And then 3 months later, 2 more tenants sublease. 6 months later, 8 subleases totaling 35,000 square feet. Meanwhile, the landlord is still sending out lease comps at full market rate, blissfully unaware that 23% of his building is undercutting him. Now count with me. How many sublease listings do you see in your target building right now? More than 3? If so, you need to pay attention. So here's the death spiral. Tenants see market softening, get nervous. They sublease excess space at below market rates. Landlord suddenly competes with own building. More tenants panic, more subleases appear, and then the building reputation tanks. When 20% of rentable space undercuts your base rents, you're not managing a property. You're watching internal distress become external collapse. And that building, well, within 18 months, 60% vacancy because the owner couldn't compete with their own tenants' pricing. But tenant behavior is reactive. The next signal is predictive. It shows distress before it happens, and it's hiding in something most investors check but completely misread. And that brings us to the E in silence, exit under pressure. And what I'm about to reveal is how the pros separate motivated sellers from desperate ones. Let me show you exactly what I mean with a deal that landed on my desk last month. Asking cap rates look generous, decent tenancy, everything appears clean. Most investors would dive into cash flow analysis. But I always check the purchase timeline first. This property bought 24 months ago with a $22 million commercial loan. Why sell 24 months into a business plan? Their refinance plan died. Rates doubled, credit tightened, and the math that worked at 4% interest kills you at 8%. And picture the owner's nightmare. Monthly payments jump from $105,000 to $165,000 overnight. The property bleeds cash. The business plan is dead. Screenshot this timeline rule because any sale within 36 months of purchase with bridge financing is a distress signal until proven otherwise. And that beautiful building sold 30% below asking price when the balloon payment hit. And if you're already thinking about loan timelines, you're seeing what most miss. But lender pressure is external force. The deadliest signal is internal weakness disguised as strength. And it's probably sitting in every deal you've ever analyzed. And this brings us to the N in silence, which stands for numbers don't lie. So imagine a mixed-use retail center, 120,000 square feet, prime location, 88% occupied. It looks bulletproof from 30,000 feet, but I dig where others don't, and what I found would terrify most investors. Here's the human psychology of small-time owners. They believe occupancy equals stability. They focus on today's rent checks while ignoring tomorrow's lease cliffs. It's not stupidity, it's survival mode thinking. Here's my fragility analysis, what the occupancy rates hide in this deal. 40% of leases expire in 18 months. The major tenant, who makes up about 50% of NOI, has a lease expiring in 12 months. The owner is a small LLC with 2 properties total. Concession packages are growing with every renewal. And when you approach it that way, that's not stability. That's just a house of cards held together with incentives and hope. And here's what some owners miss. When one tenant controls half your cash flow, you're not investing. You're betting everything on their renewal decision. And when the major tenant walks, that owner can't cover the $18 million mortgage. And suddenly, your stable investment becomes a forced sale. So pull up your last deal analysis. Count lease expirations in the next 24 months. More than 30%? You're looking at fragility, not strength. That bulletproof building, anchor tenant left, owner couldn't survive the vacancy, distressed sale 18 months later. And remember that $13 million difference from the beginning? That's exactly how it happens. And now you understand the silent system. Stalled progress, industry exodus, lease cannibalization, exit under pressure, numbers don't lie. And yes, I know it's missing a few letters, but real distress signals don't care about perfect acronyms. But here's the deeper psychology at work. Every one of these signals represents human behavior under stress. Owners get desperate, brokers get protective, tenants get panicked, and the desperate people make desperate, predictable mistakes. Now you got me. Knowing these signals is level 1. Reading them together, that's where the real money lives. Here's what happens in boardrooms when the deal starts going sideways. The conversations get quieter, the updates get vaguer, and the timeline gets flexible. And by the time the problems become public, the insiders have been planning exits for months. The most dangerous deal my team analyzed last year showed 3 signals simultaneously: broker retraction, sublease stack up, and lender pressure. While others saw a reasonable deal, we walked away. It hit foreclosure 8 months later, $12 million below asking price. And what most brokers won't tell you is this: they usually know a deal is headed for trouble 6 to 9 months before it becomes obvious. The smart money, they're already gone. And here's the brutal truth. These signals don't show up in your standard due diligence checklist. They require a different way of thinking, a different approach. So imagine walking into your next deal meeting already knowing what others will discover months later. That's not luck. That's reading human psychology through market data. And if you're already thinking about how to track these systematically, you understand why most investors stay stuck while a few dominate. Most investors wait for distress to be announced. They read about bankruptcies in newspapers. They chase auctions on courthouse steps. And that's not strategic. That's reactive. You now know the silent system. 5 distress signals that whisper before markets scream. Stalled projects hiding funding crises, brokers exodus protecting reputations, internal tenant competition destroying values, lender pressure forcing early exits, and operating fragility masquerading as stability. Your homework is to pick one signal, track it for a couple of months, start building your distress radar. If this changed how you see deals, subscribe and hit that notification bell. Most investors pay thousands for market intelligence like this. But here's what I can't teach you in a YouTube video: how to systematically track these signals across your entire market, how to layer them for maximum accuracy, how to time your moves for maximum profit. Because here's the harsh reality: knowing what to look for and actually profiting from it are 2 completely different skill sets. Which brings me to the billion-dollar question. Are you building a system to capitalize on distress, or are you going to be the distress other investors capitalize on? That's not a comfortable question, but it's the right one. Because what I've learned in 2 decades is this: in every market cycle, the same thing happens. A small group of investors systematically identifies and profits from distress signals. Everyone else is, in one way or another, a part of the distress. The silent system gives you the knowledge, but implementation, that's where professional guidance makes the difference between theory and profit. So if you're ready to turn these signals into systematic advantage, book a strategy call. I'll show you how to implement the silent system in your specific market, help you avoid becoming someone else's exit plan, and position you to profit from patterns others don't even see. Because the smartest investors don't chase the noise. They master the silence, read the psychology, and act while others are still listening for sirens. The question isn't whether these signals work. The question is whether you'll use them or ignore them until it's too late.